Canada. I want to thank all of you. Merci beaucoup. Je suis très heureuse d'être parmi vous aujourd'hui. And of course, also very privileged to be here on the traditional and unceded territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin people, which has always been a gathering place, and it is fitting that we are also gathering here. And gathering to talk about what probably is, in this moment, one of the single most crucial topics that we can talk about. I remember when I started working in democratic governance, I think it was 23 years ago, the first time that I went overseas to Bosnia, it was something that wasn't as well known, or wasn't the first thing you thought about when you talked about international development. Certainly not when you talked about the state of the world. And I think that we've seen, and all of you, you're all in this field, and we've seen the shift from in the 1990s, when there was this incredible optimism. And in fact, beyond optimism, there was almost a sense of inevitability, that democracy was opening up. I remember being in high school when the Berlin Wall came down, and we thought that this was something that was on a trajectory. It was a matter of how quickly, not whether, every single country would eventually merge into democracy. And even when we saw the beginning of social media, even when we saw the Arab Spring, Tahrir Square, there was a sense that with this great change in communication technology, with this ability to connect around the world, would come a tremendous opening up, a democratization. And unfortunately, we're standing here now, decades later, and we've seen it has actually been quite the opposite. And what we are seeing today, when we talk about democracy, is, first of all, it is front of mind. The reason it's front of mind is because we know we can no longer take it for granted. We know that democratic backsliding is not just happening in those countries over there, that we were seeing all of these emerging democracies that we were all working with in our organizations in the 90s and the 2000s. What's happened here is that Canada has always been a country that we're very privileged, that we've been buffered by our geography. Canada is a country where we made a deliberate and purposeful country that is not based on any one nation, ethnicity. We deliberately created a country that it took a long time, and it's still a work in progress, where our identity is based on our civic identity, on equality before law. And it's something that is very special and very unique. But because of that, of course, our grandfathers and our forefathers have fought for democracy. I know that certainly my own family were liberated in World War II when Canadian soldiers came through my dad's city and liberated them and gave them their first candy. So there is always this very strong sense that Canadians have more to do internationally. But we didn't feel the threat here. And we are no longer protected by geography, because geography no longer exists. When we have a world where the authoritarian and illiberal and anti-democratic forces can get right into your child's phone in your own living room, we're living in a very different universe. And I think that one of the things, and I see that everybody is feeling very heavy right now, one of the things that I'm here to say today is that Canada is actually incredibly well placed for this kind of world. We have a lot to learn. There are a lot of countries out there that we need to learn from, that have always been dealing with propaganda, that have always been dealing with disinformation, and that have the critical tools to be able to do that. Canadians, not as prepared. But on the other hand, Canada has, as an experiment, from its very beginnings, we have never been an imperial power. However, we are living in a post-colonial society where we have to deal with all of the intergenerational trauma that colonization has created, and also the structures and the ways in which we do things that still, to this day, are colonial. We have a country that was founded with two founding nations, with different languages and different systems, even different systems of justice, and we made it work. We have people now who have come from every single part of the world. People like my own parents who left after World War II and made a home here in Canada. And we have, I think, a society that does believe at its heart that we are better when we all work together and that you don't have to choose between your identities, whatever those identities might be. But at the same time right now, we are seeing that illiberalism and that polarization and that anti-democratic tendency is taking hold. And I'm here to say that when political leaders, and I'm a politician, when political leaders turn to a population and say, this is your neighbor, be afraid of your neighbor. Your neighbor wants to hurt you. People do respond to that. And fear is something that can very easily lead to hatred. When a politician, on the other hand, says, this is your neighbor needs your help, I truly believe that as humans, we are social. That as humans, it's in our nature to want to help. And I think that what we need to do right now is we need to appeal to that better nature of humanity. And I'm looking at a room full of people who have probably seen the worst of human nature. I bet there's not a person in this room that doesn't understand that the veneer of civilization is very, very thin. And you have probably all seen things you wish you could unsee. And I'm amongst you because I come from your world before politics. And yet, you're here. You're here with Cooperation Canada. You're here with human rights defenders that have found sanctuary here in Canada, not for their own lives, but so they can continue to do the work and the human rights work and the democracy work from this place here in Canada to continue fighting. You're all continuing the fight. Why? Because I think we all really do know deep down that it is a fight worth fighting. We all know it is a fight that can be won. And I think right now our greatest enemy is not any state, it is not any authoritarian regime, it is not any of the people that are promoting violence in the streets. Our greatest enemy right now is futility. It's futility, it's hopelessness, it's disengagement. And one of the things that I'm seeing in 8 years as a member of parliament, in the beginning when I first got elected, if somebody didn't like something the government did, I heard about it. And I do an open coffee hour every Friday. And I would get 100 people at that coffee hour telling us exactly what we were doing wrong and why they didn't like it. And now, I wish I got those people back. Because now I do my coffee hour and I get 20 people, maybe, same people every week. And when I say talk to your neighbors, bring your neighbors, I want to hear from them. And they don't come and they say, well, it's because I told my neighbor. And my neighbor said, well, there's no point, she won't listen anyway. And even if she did listen, there's nothing she can do about it, it's pointless. The disengagement from democratic processes is our greatest threat. The people in this room who are engaged in this, who are fighting the fight, who know deep down that this is something that we working together can do, you are the solution. And Canadians are particularly good at this. And I think that if I leave you with anything, I can talk about all of the things that our government is doing, and there are many, many things. And I know that, for instance, we have a human rights defenders stream of immigration that is bringing now 500 human rights defenders every year to Canada. We are part of, actually we're chairing the Global Media Coalition. We just signed, actually, with the Netherlands, a declaration on the integrity of information online. And that's another thing. We're in a world that are just changing so quickly. Even what I learned as a practitioner of democratic development is stale dated now because I've been elected for 8 years and things have changed so much that's why it's very important also for us as decision makers to keep listening to all of you. Canada right now is doing a lot, but we need more. And what we need are the people that are sitting here in the front row, the people who are continuing to fight, even when you see things like what happened in Afghanistan, even when you see that the world right now, no matter where you look, is full of crisis, continuing that fight. And if there's one thing that we can do here today, is we can stand beside you, we can stand with you, we can support you, and that's exactly what Resilient Societies is all about. And so I'm so proud to be able to be here and to be able to be with you. And I think that if I leave one last thing, we as legislators, we are the front line of democracy. When we talk about the battle between democracy and authoritarianism globally, it is legislators, elected people, who have to be there, who have to be working across transnational boundaries, because the violence and the threats that people face, like those that are here today, is transnational. And as legislators, we need to be working with one another. And that's why, for instance, I've been working with the Parliamentarians for Global Action on the Parliamentary Rapid Response Team. I've been working with the Parliamentary Center on Women Legislators in Defense, of building those networks of legislators around the world, because it does matter what leaders have to say. So thank you very, very much. Merci beaucoup. I would like to also acknowledge Talib Noor Mohammed, MP, who is here also today. I don't see other MPs in the room, but I do think that having that engagement between members of Parliament and civil society is vitally, vitally important. So thank you for inviting me today, and I'm very much looking forward to hearing the panel. Merci.